2 days after my last post, I made it to the motel Cody and Tracy were staying at. It was a beat-down piece of crap about 15 miles outside of Site 49, but it wasn't too far, so I could see why they chose it. I walked inside of the small office and rang the bell for the clerk. A man in his late 30s came out of the back room with a door marked "Employees Only." He was wearing a dirty wife beater and had a cigarette hanging out of his mouth. I eyed the sign on the counter that read "No Smoking" and quirked my brow at the clerk. "You need a room?" he grumbled. His voice was thick and gruff. "Probably from all the cigarettes." I nodded. "15 for the hour, or 40 for the night." I swallowed back the distaste in my mouth. The rented rooms by the hour? This place was definitely a crap hole. I pulled my wallet from my back pocket and grabbed 220s from the small number of bills I had inside. The man slid them off of the counter and tucked them into his pocket. He turned his back for a moment to the row of keys hanging on the clips behind the counter and plucked one marked 14. He handed it to me. "One more thing," I said. I unlocked my phone and pulled up the picture I had of Cody and Tracy on the screen. Have you seen these two?" The clerk's face turned sour. "Yeah, they were here about a month ago. Stiffed me for a night." Do you know where they went?" "No idea. All I know is I'm out of money for their room. Are you here to settle the tab?" I opened my mouth to protest, but the next motel wasn't for another 10 miles, and I doubted he would give me the money back I'd already paid. "How much did they owe you?" The man smirked. 60. "Bullcrap," I said. I then bit my tongue. The clerk to notice. "Cleaning fee. You can either pay me what I'm owed, or you can go find another establishment to stay at." I held back the comment I wanted to make about this seedy garbage fire. It was a far cry from being considered an establishment. I copped up the extra money. "A pleasure doing business with you." I walked back outside when my car was the only one parked in the lot. It seemed most other people were willing to drive the extra 20 or so minutes. I put my key in the lock of the room 14 and jiggled the knob when it stuck. The room was what you'd expect, so as long as you had really low expectations. The walls were nicotine stained, suggestion for their previously white coating long gone. The carpet was green and so old it looked like it had a stain to mark every year since its installation. I didn't even want to think about the state of the bed. I walked over to it and lifted the blankets to check for bed bugs. When I didn't find any, I peeled back the sheets to check for stains. Surprisingly, they looked clean, new. I kicked off my shoes and crawled under the covers, tucking them under my folded arms. If I was being honest, I was scared to go to Site 49. As much as I wanted to find my brother and Tracy, and I did, I was also terrified. I didn't know what had happened to them, who had taken them or what. What if I couldn't save them? What if they were dead? What if... And I hated myself for being such a coward to even think this, but what if whatever got them got me too? It was hot when I woke up the next morning. The AC kicked off at some point during the night, and it was 66 degrees in there. I flung the covers off and swung my legs over the bed. I pulled my sweaty shirt from my back and stood. I felt and smelled disgusting. I didn't know if I trusted the shower enough to use it, so I walked to the bathroom and flicked on the light. It was surprisingly clean, so I hopped in and showered in cold water before I got dressed in the clean clothes tucked away in my duffel bag. I towel dried my hair quickly and grabbed my keys from the table by the door. Here we go. I left in the late morning, the sun blazing high in the cloudless sky. The drive wasn't long. It took about 20 minutes to get to the coordinates of Site 49. I pulled up to a building on the outskirts of the town and turned off my engine. I stilled my nerves for several moments. I could do this. I had to. No one else knew they were here. No one else would be able to save them. It had to be me. It could only be me. I got out of the car. Immediately the heat beat down on me, arid warmth searing my exposed skin. Cody was right. It It was freaking hot. I approached the building I parked my car next to. The windows were coated in grim, but after wiping it off with my hand, I cleared enough to peer inside. It looked like an apothecary. Large cabinets with small drawers housing bottles of medicine lining the walls around the room. There were rows of shelves next to the counter, mason jars filled with pig feet and cow tongue. I made a face and backed away from the store. I doubted they were in there. I walked down the wooden steps and back out of the dusty road. They could be anywhere. I didn't even know where to start. "You shouldn't be here." I started and whipped around, looking into the face of a child. A young girl. She was the same one from Cody's voicemail. You shouldn't be here," she repeated. She was very pale and very thin. She looked malnourished, like she hadn't eaten in weeks, maybe longer. Her hair was mousy and thin, bald patches marking parts of her scalp. I couldn't tell if she was real or not, just like Cody couldn't. Cody wasn't lying when he said we'd never really seen any evidence of the supernatural on our trips. Occasionally we heard scratching, sometimes breathing, but we usually just took that up to the power of suggestion. Over the course of our lives and the years we'd spent tracking down things that shouldn't exist, we never found any concrete evidence that they actually exist. So when looking at this child, this dirty, hungry child, I didn't see a ghost. I saw a poor kid that needed to eat. "I'm looking for my brother and his girlfriend," I said. Have you seen them?" I pulled out my phone and showed her the same picture I'd shown the clerk at the motel that night. The girl's face remained expressionless. She stared at the picture for a while, though longer than would be normal if she didn't know them. "I told them they shouldn't be here," she said. "What? Wait, you remember them? Do you know where they are?" I crouched down to her level and firmly grabbed her by the arms. I looked into her face. Please, I have to find them. They're in danger. Please, tell me where they are." "I told them they shouldn't be here," the girl said again, and cupped my face with her small hand. "And neither should you. Now you're stuck here. Just like them." Then she grinned at me, a rotten, blackened horror, and widened her jaws to bite my arm. I screamed and tried to shake her off, but she was latched on with the ferocity of something much stronger than someone as a small child she was. I yanked on the hair, but as I did, it came out as a thick clump in my hand. What the heck? She took another bite, and when her jaws were briefly unclamped, I grabbed the back of her neck and thrusted her away from me. She fell into her back and rolled into a crouch. She snarled at me, barking her bloody teeth as she prepared to pounce. I looked around for something, anything that I could use. I spotted a large rock and snatched it up. When she was almost on me, I smashed her over the head with it. Her head made an awful cracking noise, then she fell on the ground with a heavy thud. She was still twitching when I got to my feet. I panted heavily and tore off the bottom of my t-shirt to wrap over the bite marks on my arm. They were deep, oozing blood down my hand so that it dripped into the dusty ground beneath my tennis shoes. The girl groaned and tried to move, but she couldn't. Either the hit had paralyzed her or she was too weak to do anything. I rolled her over on her back. "Where are they?" I growled between clenched teeth. She took gasping, wheezing breaths as she lay there on the ground. I thought for a moment she was too weak to even speak, but then she looked right into my eyes and said, "You should have left when you had the chance." Then she laughed that high, childish giggle that I'd heard in Cody's voicemails. I gripped the rock harder and smashed her in the head with it again, once, twice, 3 times, until she stopped laughing and her brain matter looked like ground meat. I stumbled on my feet, breathing hard, and let the stone fall from my hand, and then I vomited. I braced my hands and my knees as my body convulsed, the force of it arching my back so that my stomach expended its contents. It landed on the remains of the dead girl. I vomited some more. Eventually I stopped puking, and I spit a few times to get the acrid taste out of my mouth. I just murdered someone, a little kid. I I felt dirty, tainted, like I'd lost some pivotal part of myself that I'd never get back. I never would get it back. I had to go. Whatever I had done, it paled in comparison to what would happen to Cody and Tracy if I didn't find them. I swung around, looking all over the buildings in this crazy freaking town, thinking desperately about where they could be. And then, I spotted it in the distance. The church. A big, hulking thing with tall spires piercing the sky. I knew immediately that that was where they were. I threw open my car door and shoved my keys into the ignition. The engine caught, and I pressed hard on the accelerator as I whipped the steering wheel around. It took about 2 minutes to get to the church. I slammed on the brakes and flung open the door. The church was a large structure made mostly of stone. Most of the windows didn't have glass. Rusted metal bars crossed over the openings. As I stared up at the church, my fervent anger flattered for a brief moment as I was confronted with one more time with the enormity of what I would be walking into. And then I heard my brother's voice, and that last voicemail. Panicked and terrified, helpless. I yanked open the heavy wooden doors. They swung open, a mouth yawning open to inhale that which chose to enter it. I walked inside. It was quiet. Most places this far removed from society usually were, the freedom from noise pollution providing a profound lacking that was as noticeable as any sound. There were rows and rows of wooden pews, standing at attention and facing the front of the church. There was a podium at the tip of a raised dais, a large and leaden-looking book laid on top of it, and behind it there should be a cross hanging from the wall with Jesus mounted on it, but there was nothing. Instead, there was a large tree, its limbs outstretched and reaching for the ceiling. The face of the man with the antlers was carved into the trunk with such acute detail it looked like he had been real once and had melded with the tree over time, until they were one and the same. Staring at the tree was wrong, like I was peering into something that wasn't meant for me. I felt like I was staring at a millennia of history, but that history was only for a certain kind of person. It had spent all those years growing around me, unfurling itself in directions I had never gone, its path far removed from my own, until now, when we had reached our convergence point. My shoes scuffed against the concrete floor. I took small steps until I reached the dais, and I climbed the steps up to the podium. I looked at the book and ran my fingers over the insignia of the tree that was so significant to this town. I flipped the book open to the middle. It was a picture of a man holding a woman in his arms. He held her face up to his, and for a moment it looked like they were kissing. And then I realized he was eating her. His teeth dug into the skin of her cheek, and the picture was so detailed I could see the sinewy strings of her exposed flesh. Under the picture there was an inscription that read, "The man celebrates that sacrifice of the woman by treasuring her offering." I stepped away from the book in disgust. Everything pointed more and more to this place being the home of a cult, and not just a cult, but a cannibalistic one. I thought of the girl I had killed and how she had taken a couple of chunks out of my arm. How she had looked malnourished, like she hadn't eaten in a very long time, and Cody and Tracy being kidnapped after they had come to this very church. And then it hit me. This place was never abandoned. The people that lived here never left. I heard music then, the muffled sound of piano keys being gently stroked somewhere beneath my feet. It was a slow song, a song that meandered through its tempo instead of rushing through it. I looked around, trying to find a way on the lower levels of the church. There was a door that, from the position of the podium, was hidden beneath the tree. I walked over to it, resting my ear against the wood to listen for the music. It was coming from there. I twisted the doorknob and pulled the door open, just like a crack. It led to a stairwell that was dark and dank. I stepped inside and went down the stairs, pausing at the landing to peer around the corner. It led to more stairs. As I walked down, I could hear the gentle humming of voices I couldn't hear before. They were drowned in unison, the melody haunting and eerie. It sounded like the same song Cody had hummed in his voicemail. I reached the bottom of the stairs. A long stone hallway stretched before me, several doors leading off on both sides. But the music was coming from the door straight ahead, so that was the one I moved toward. The music was picking up pace, the humming more erratic. They were grunting now, yelling, desperation lengthening the notes as they sung them. I shivered with revulsion. There was something so wrong about the song, something off. It felt unholy, like it was sucking all the good from the air, replacing it with something dark, something sinister. The music was at its height, the rhythm cresting to a crescendo, that sounding like a pulsating heartbeat, and then, with a final, anguished cry, it ceased. The door was partly slighted. I peered inside at the scene beyond. It was similar to upstairs, but smaller. There were several wooden pews set in a line or on either side of the aisle, big enough for 2 or 3 people sitting inside them. The room was well lit, with dozens of candles. A woman stood in the front, clearly respected as every person's eyes were trained on her. She held her arms aloft, her blood red, closable, obscuring the table beneath her. "Today we celebrate the gifts that our gracious Lord has sent to us," she said, her voice clear and strong. "In times of difficulty, such as we have been in for these past many years, we need only pray to the Savior, our Lord, who has blessed us and blessed again." People in the pews were nodding and beating the air with their hands. "He is forgiving, our Lord, and through His mercy, we have this beautiful reward." She gestured behind her and moved so that the room could see. There was a large mica table on a raised stone floor. The body of a heavy-set man was strapped on the table. My stomach lurched. The man was still alive, fighting sluggishly against the leather straps that bound his hands and feet. They were going to kill him. This was a sacrifice for the so-called god. The woman brandished a glass knife from inside her sleeve and moved around on the other side of the table. As her hem grazed the floor, I could finally see the face of the person they had strapped him down. I had to clamp my hand over my mouth to keep from screaming. It was Cody. It was Cody, my brother. "We thank thee, O Lord, for blessing us with that which sustain us beyond our tribulations." Oh my God, they were going to kill him. I cast a panicked glance at the people in the pews, their thinning hair, the bones of their backs visible through their shirts. They were going to eat him. The woman plunged the knife into Cody's sternum and dragged it down to his belly button. He screamed through the gag in his mouth, but she smiled and tore further and further down to his waistband. Blood poured into the table, leaked into the floor where there were bowls to catch the drippings from my brother. She peeled back his skin to reveal intestines, which she took out and put on the plates that were lined up on the table. She licked the blood off of her fingers. Cody was dead before she finished. I fell to my knees and dried heavy, my stomach empty from earlier when I had killed the girl. My head was buzzing and I felt like I was on the verge of insanity. How could someone's life end like that, so cruelly, so suddenly? The only reason I didn't charge into that room is because there were too many of them and I knew I would end up like Cody if I did. And then I remembered Tracy. I had to find Tracy. I didn't know if she was still alive or if they had already eaten her, but I had to find her. I knew Cody would want me to. I stumbled to my feet, leaning on the wall to steady myself. I faced away back to the stairwell and I eyed the doors, having no idea which one Tracy would be in. There were so many there. Where was I supposed to start? I picked one at random. There were beds inside, 4 of them positioned across from each other. They were made up neatly, the cleanliness suggesting a normalcy these people didn't possess. I felt the door open and tried another room, another bedroom, and another, and another. How many people lived here? I tried a door that led to an office. Through it I could see a smaller door. I ran over to it, hoping it was just a closet. It wasn't. There was a smaller staircase that led down into the pitch black darkness. I glanced behind me quickly to make sure no one had seen me, and I closed the door quietly behind me, so as I stood on the landing of the stairs, I pulled out my phone. I needed to call the police, but it was too much. It ran so deep, and I would be lucky if I had made it out alive. I checked the reception in the corner. No signal, of course. I pushed out a shaky breath and descended the stairs. I turned on the flashlight on my phone and pointed it out in front of me. I was in the basement. The floors were dirt, and there were several wooden posts holding up the ceiling. There was blood on the ground. I couldn't help but think about how it was Cody's, how he had resisted them, how they'd probably beaten him for it. I shook my head. Now wasn't the time to think about that. His death would mean nothing if Tracy died too. A muffled scream and a rattle of chains. I swung the flashlight around, looking for the sound. There, in the far corner of the basement, was Tracy. She was crying and tugging on the chains desperately. I rushed over to her and pulled the gag from her mouth. "Ethan! Oh, freak, Ethan! They took Cody. They took him. You have to find him." I tried not to look at Tracy, but I knew she should know. "Tracy," I started, but I couldn't get the words out of my mouth. I couldn't say it out loud. I didn't want to make it any more real than it already was. We stared at each other for several beats, and I watched as the realization dawned on her. "No," she sobbed and shook her head as more tears fell. He was just right here. Right here." I grabbed Tracy's face and forced her to look at me. "Tracy, we need to focus. The last thing Cody would want for us to die too. We have to get out of here. For him." She nodded but kept crying. I pointed the flashlight at the cuffs. They were leather at her wrists, but metal where they would loop around one of the wooden posts. They had a keyhole to unlock it, but I doubted I would find it down here. "I need to find something to get you free," I told Tracy. No, you can't leave me here," she pleaded. "I'll be right back. We're not getting out of here if I can't get the cuffs off." She begged me not to go, but I ignored her as I ran up the stairs. When I got to the top, I turned off the flashlight and looked through the door. The office was clear. I rifled in the drawers of the desk for the key, but they were all empty. There was nothing sharp in the room I could use either. "Crap," I muttered. I might have to go back out into the hall and search the bedrooms. My stomach churned as I grabbed the door handle. I really hoped that they were still congregated in the other room. I turned the knob and had just started to open the door when I heard voices outside. I froze, not daring to move, not daring to breathe. The people were talking and laughing, sounding giddy and happy as they walked down the hallway. I was filled with rage at that moment. A feeling so primal I had felt, and I could rip their throats out with just my teeth. My brother was dead because of them. They feasted on his flesh and thanked some god for it. These people, this cult, had destroyed the most significant part of my life. I wanted to burn them to the ground. The voices faded, but I waited several minutes before I left. There was no one in the hallway when I checked in, and before I could think about it too much, I ran into one of the bedrooms. I shut the door quickly behind me and wasted no time in looking for something to free Tracy. I looked through the bedside tables and under the beds, but there was nothing. I looked in the wardrobe. Apart from a few raggedy dresses, it was empty, and then I saw a glint of metal underneath one of the pillows. I pulled it out, and it was a small switchblade. I turned to leave when the door flung open. I dropped to the floor and crawled under one of the beds, my heart thudding so painfully in my chest I thought it would soon burst its way out. I could see small feet enter the room and hoist themselves onto the bed. They swung their feet back and forth for a moment, humming the song they'd all been singing before they murdered Cody. It was so disorienting to see this small child behaving so normally, so much like other small children, but knowing that they had just been eating my brother not 10 minutes before. Suddenly, the child let out a pained howl and ran from the room. "Who stole my knife?" it yelled. "Who took it?" It howled again and again, demanding to know who stole its knife, and then its shrill voice turned into a constant scream as it stood there and shrieked in the hallway. "Hey, calm down, what happened?" A more adult voice soothed, trying to calm the child. "My knife is gone," the child cried. "We'll find it, don't worry." The child's sobs faded as it was led down the hallway. I rolled out from under the bed and hid behind the door for a moment. After I determined that the hall was clear, I ran back to the office and to the little door. By the time I got to Tracy, she looked wild with fright. I heard a scream. I thought they'd gotten you. I started cutting the leather that bounded her wrist. I'm fine, I said, not daring to think too much about whether it was true or not. No, it wasn't the time. After a few moments, I freed Tracy, and together we sprinted up the stairs. I pushed her behind me and confirmed the coast was clear. We dashed into the hallway and moved towards the other staircase that led into the upper levels of the church. Did he take my knife? My stomach plummeted. We turned around, slowly, now face to face with that little boy. He peered at us, curiously, with a small smile playing about his mouth. Yes, I did, I said. I grabbed the knife from my pocket and held it out to him, my other hand up to placate him, as if he were a cougar I'd encouraged in the woods. If I give it back to you, will you promise not to say anything? The kid nodded and took the knife. He stared at us, as if we were some wonder on display on a museum. Then he grinned, a horrible and bloody smile, and screamed. People rushed up from their rooms and stopped when they spotted us. We stood at the cellmate for a moment. The tension at the hall, thick and charged. Then we ran. Tracy and I bolted up the stairs and out of the church. We rushed on the rows of pews, and her hand in mine gripping me so tightly I felt she might break it. We skirted around the benches and bolted over the carpeted aisle. We nearly made it out to the door when she was pulled from me. Ethan, she shrieked, her arms flailing as she tried to grab me. A huge man with stringy hair was dragging her back to the dais. I tried to pull her from him, but he was too strong. He held her with one hand and shoved me to the floor with the other. I rolled to my feet and looked around for something, anything I could use against him, but at that moment, the rest of the people from under the stairs burst out into the dais, dozens of them crowding around each other, staring at me and Tracy hungrily. Stay there, the man said to me, and held his hand under Tracy's chin. I took a step forward, unsure of what I was planning to do. The man dug his fingers into the skin of Tracy's throat. She cried out in pain. He dragged his nails across her neck slowly, blood trickling down to the rest of the tip of her collarbone. Let her go, I shouted, but the man just smiled. Tracy bucked wildly and kicked off one of the pews. They crashed to the ground, the man's head cracking against the concrete floor. Blood bloomed where his head made contact. I grabbed Tracy and yanked her up. We ran to the door of the church. The people from below followed right behind us. We wrestled the car and fell inside. I rammed my keys into the ignition and stomped on the gas. The people swarmed out to meet us, running at the car and beating on the windows. One of them broke the glass on the driver's side. He tried to pull me from the car, but I tightened my grip to the wheel with one hand, punched at him erratically with the other. He laughed. I recognized that laugh. It was the one from Cody's voicemail, the one who dragged him from the car. He was the reason my brother died. I slammed on the brakes. The man flew off the car, the momentum tossing him forward so that he crashed on the ground. I flung the door open, ignoring Tracy as she screamed at me to get back inside. I straddled the man on the ground and grabbed him by the collar. I didn't say anything. I hit him. And then I hit him again, over and over until his face was so bloody I could barely tell there was a person underneath it. I didn't know if he was breathing anymore. I didn't care. I pulled my fist back to hit him again, but Tracy stopped me. Ethan, we have to go, they're coming. I looked behind us, where there were other cultists were closing the lead we had gained in the car. I swore under my breath and looked down at the man, not getting the satisfaction I was hoping from his freaked up face. Tracy and I bolted back inside and peeled off across the dirt. We drove away from the town. Some of the cultists tried to give chase, but they couldn't keep us on foot. We watched them fade in the rearview mirror, trying to wave us down, trying to get us to turn around. I didn't let up off the gas until the town was miles away, the sunlight receding against our backs. After a while, I found the ability to speak. So can I ask? I hesitated, unsure how to phrase my question. I looked at Tracy and eyed her up and down. "Are you asking how I got fat?" she said, an eyebrow quirk. "Well..." She stared at her lap and picked up the skin around her fingernails. "They fed us when we were down there," she whispered. I was about to question if they fed her what they were eating, people, but she cut me off. "Not human meat, it was this nasty green stuff. They forced it down our throats with a tube. It was hard to choke down, but they made us drink every last drop." We fell into silence. My anger boiled my blood. Those freaking people. They prepared them like pigs for slaughter, force-fed them to fatten them up, to get higher yield. Bile rose in my throat, and I had to push past the urge to puke. I clenched the steering wheel so tightly I thought my knuckles would shatter under my grip. I whipped the car into the parking lot of a local grocery store and threw the gear into park. "What are you doing?" "Get out," I said, and leaned over to open Tracy's door. "What?" I said, "Get out." I got my phone under my pocket and folded it in Tracy's fingers. "Go inside, stay with people. Call the police and tell them to meet me at the church." You're going back? Are you crazy?" "Maybe, but I don't care. I'm going to burn that town to the freaking ground." Hope you guys enjoyed the story for today. Thank you guys for listening. Now, huge and special thanks to the Redditor /Marilyn Speared for allowing me to narrate the second part of the series. And you guys seem to like it a lot, so I decided to narrate the second part of it. Hope you guys enjoyed it a lot. Yeah, the ending was insane. I hope you guys enjoyed it. But enough said. I hope you guys enjoyed it once again, and I will see you guys in the next story. So, don't forget to sit back, relax, and indulge in fear.